5 days before my wedding. I found my own name hidden behind a concrete pillar, not on the guest list, on the seating chart. The venue manager traced her finger across the ballroom layout before finally locating my place. Emma Carter, table 21, the last table in the room, beside the emergency exit, directly behind a massive support column. If I sat there, I wouldn't even be able to see the head table. I looked toward the center of the ballroom, the sweetheart table Ethan and I had spent months designing together, and was gone. In its place stood a 6-seat head table beneath the white rose arch I'd personally chosen. Ethan's name occupied the center seat. To his left, his mother. To his right, Claire Bennett. Every remaining chair belonged to the Whitmore family. There wasn't one for the bride. The venue manager swallowed nervously. Miss Carter, this was yesterday's final revision. Miss Bennett approved the changes on behalf of Mr. Whitmore. She looked at Ethan. If you'd like... we can still restore the original layout. Before I could speak, Ethan answered for me. It's fine. He didn't even glance at the chart. Claire immediately lowered her eyes. Ethan, maybe I should move. She reached lightly for his sleeve. I don't want Emma feeling uncomfortable. The words sounded generous. The timing wasn't. Ethan covered her hand with his own. You've just moved back from London. You barely know anyone here anymore. You'll feel more comfortable sitting beside us. Us. Not beside me. Beside us. Margaret Whitmore smiled the way adults smile before explaining something obvious to a child. Emma, you'll have every day beside Ethan after the wedding. Claire lost both her parents. We're the closest family she has, surely. You can spare a few hours. A few hours, apparently. That's what my place beside my future husband had become. Something to borrow. I looked back at the seating chart, then at the manager. Who asked you to remove the sweetheart table? She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward Ethan. Before she could answer, Claire spoke first. It was only an idea. A table for two always feels lonely. A wedding should bring the people closest to you together. I looked directly at her. So you solved that by putting yourself beside the groom and the bride behind a pillar? Color drained from her face. I didn't know where your seat ended up. That must have been the planner. Her voice trembled perfectly, almost professionally. Ethan, I asked quietly, where do you think the bride should sit? He actually laughed, not cruelly, casually, as though I were asking about napkin colors. You'll be standing beside me during the ceremony. Does it really matter where you eat dinner? The ballroom disappeared around me. In one sentence, he'd reduced months of planning and years of love to a chair. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 34 years old. 3 years ago, my best friend Sophie and I built a wedding design studio called Ever After Weddings. We designed ceremonies for couples across New England. Every flower arrangement, every lighting cue, every seating chart, every song, every handwritten place card. I believed weddings weren't about luxury. They were about making two people feel like the center of their own story. The irony was almost unbearable. I'd spent years making brides feel seen. Now, I couldn't even find myself at my own wedding. If someone had asked whether Ethan Whitmore loved me, and I would have answered yes, because love had never been our problem. Priority was. Every time another person needed something, my place quietly moved one step backward. Never enough to start a fight, always enough to leave a bruise. At our engagement party, he asked me to help greet relatives while he introduced Claire to investors. You don't mind. You understand. At his mother's birthday lunch, I waited until dessert to give Margaret the rare first edition novel I'd spent weeks finding, because Ethan didn't want my gift to overshadow Claire's scarf. You're the mature one, he smiled at a charity gala. He danced the first dance he'd promised me. With Claire. She just got back from London. She feels out of place. You understand. Every explanation sounded different. Every outcome looked exactly the same. Whenever someone had to move aside, it was always me. I walked away from the ballroom toward the corridor outside, not because I wanted to cry, because I needed air. Halfway down the hallway, I stopped outside a service room after hearing Ethan's assistant speaking on the phone. Yes, Miss Carter noticed the seating. A pause, then, no, Mr. Whitmore said not to change anything. Another pause. I understand. We'll continue following Miss Bennet's instructions. He laughed softly. Miss Carter's easygoing. She won't make a real scene. The call ended. I never opened the door. I didn't need to. For the first time, and I realized nobody had been asking me to understand. They'd simply been counting on me to stay quiet. I didn't walk back into the ballroom. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop at one of the empty cocktail tables overlooking Boston Harbor. If everyone else was making decisions about my wedding, I wanted to know exactly how many of those decisions still belonged to me. The answer surprised me. More than half. The Harborview Hotel contract required both Ethan's signature and mine to cancel. So did the catering, the ballroom, the liquor package. Those were joint agreements. But everything else, the flowers, photography, lighting, guest favors, stationery, welcome displays, digital production, the bridal slideshow, every creative element that made the wedding feel like ours, had been commissioned through Ever After Weddings. My company, my contracts, paid for with my money. I opened a blank email. No dramatic speech, no accusations. Just one instruction. Effective immediately, suspend all services authorized by Emma Carter and Ever After Weddings. No designs, photographs, branding, or creative assets may be used without my written approval. I read it twice, then pressed send. By the time I returned to the private dining room, someone else was already sitting where I should have been. Claire occupied the seat at the head of the table beside Ethan. Margaret was gently sliding a bowl of soup toward her. You've always had a sensitive stomach. Eat before it gets cold. No one noticed me walk in. The menu binder lay open beside Ethan. Half the pages were marked with handwritten revisions. I picked it up. My stomach tightened. The crab bisque had been added as the opening course. 7 years earlier. I'd gone into anaphylactic shock after eating shellfish. Ethan had carried me into the emergency room himself. He'd stayed awake beside my hospital bed all night. He'd held my hand and whispered, "As long as I'm here, no one will ever forget what can hurt you." Now, the one dish he used to protect me from had become the featured appetizer, because Claire loved it. She noticed where my eyes had stopped. "Oh, I'm so sorry." She smiled apologetically. "I completely forgot." Margaret immediately came to her defense. "Don't blame yourself. Emma isn't allergic to looking at soup. It'll only be one course." One course. Apparently, my safety now had a time limit. Ethan, I closed the menu. "Did you approve these changes?" He barely looked up. "It's only dinner." "The kitchen can prepare something separate for you." I stared at him. It was never about preparing something separate. It was about remembering. For a second, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Then, it disappeared. Claire lowered her spoon. If this is because of me, I'll sit in the back. She made no attempt to stand. Margaret sighed dramatically. There you go again, always blaming yourself. Then she looked at me. You've always been the reasonable one. Please don't make Claire feel unwelcome. Reasonable, another familiar word. In the Whitmore family, being reasonable meant accepting less so everyone else could have more. I finally asked the question nobody wanted to hear. What exactly am I here for? Silence. Ethan looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? This is my wedding. I planned it. I designed it. I paid for half of it. So tell me, what role am I playing now? Nobody answered. Claire suddenly pushed back her chair. Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have come. She reached for her purse. I'll leave. Before she'd taken 2 steps, Ethan caught her wrist. Stop. He turned toward me instead. His voice was calm, cold. Emma, enough. That one word hit harder than shouting ever could. Not, let's fix this. Not, I'm sorry. Just enough. I laughed quietly, not because anything was funny, because disappointment sometimes escapes as laughter before it becomes tears. I looked directly at Ethan. The seating chart, the menu, the sweetheart table. Those were all Claire's decisions. Weren't they? His eyes shifted, not toward me, toward Claire. Only for a heartbeat, but I saw it. He knew. He'd known all along. I nodded slowly. I understand now. Then I placed my phone on the table. I've suspended every wedding service contracted through me. The room froze. Ethan stood. You did what? Margaret nearly knocked over her chair. Emma, have you completely lost your mind? Claire whispered exactly what I'd expected. Is this because of me? She looked at Ethan. I'll leave. Again. She never actually moved. She never had to. Because someone else always moved for her. Nobody moved. Not Ethan. Not Margaret. Not even Claire. The silence stretched just long enough for everyone to realize I wasn't bluffing. Ethan was the first to recover. Emma, you can't suspend the vendors 5 days before the wedding. I already did. His jaw tightened. You're threatening me. I shook my head. No. I'm protecting work that belongs to me. Margaret stepped between us. Do you have any idea how many people are attending? Foundation directors, business partners, board members. If the vendors disappear, the Whitmore family will be humiliated. I met her eyes. When I was moved behind a pillar, was anyone worried about my humiliation? She looked away, just for a second. Then the familiar confidence returned. You're making this far bigger than it needs to be. The meeting ended awkwardly. No one finished lunch. No one talked about flowers, or music, or vows. Every conversation became damage control. I simply collected my notebook, said goodbye to the venue manager, and walked out. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about becoming Mrs. Whitmore. I was thinking about becoming Emma Carter again. That evening, Olivia, our wedding planner, sent me the finalized production schedule. The file name caught my attention immediately. Bennett approved. Final version. Not bride approved. Not couple approved. Bennett. I opened it. My heart sank. The opening welcome screen showed a photograph of Ethan standing in the center. Claire held his arm, smiling brightly. I appeared on the opposite side, cropped so tightly that half my shoulder had disappeared. It looked less like an engagement photo and more like I'd accidentally wandered into someone else's picture. I messaged Olivia. "Where's my bridal portrait?" Several minutes passed before she replied. Miss Bennet felt a solo portrait of you looked too empty. Mr. Whitmore approved removing it. I stared at the screen. Empty. Apparently, the bride herself made the wedding feel empty. I kept scrolling. Every page revealed another surprise. The handmade chocolates I'd spent weeks designing had been replaced with scented candles because Claire preferred them. The song Ethan and I danced to on our very first date had been removed from the reception playlist. In its place was the song Claire posted on Instagram the week she returned from London. Investor seating had also changed. Nearly every executive from Whitmore Capital, along with directors from the Whitmore Foundation. It had been placed around Claire's table. A planning note explained why. To help Miss Bennet reconnect with Boston's professional network. I stopped scrolling. This wasn't wedding planning anymore. Someone was using my wedding to rebuild Claire's social life. When Ethan came home later that night, I already had a suitcase waiting beside the front door. He loosened his tie as he walked in. "You saw the production schedule." It wasn't a question. I slid the tablet across the kitchen island. "Whose wedding is this?" He barely looked at the screen. "They're only planning details. My bridal portrait was deleted. We can take another one. Our first song disappeared. It's just music." My guests were moved. They'll still be there. Every answer sounded smaller than the last, as though reducing the problem could somehow reduce the hurt. I finally looked directly at him. "Why are Whitmore Capital investors sitting beside Claire?" For the first time, he hesitated. She lived overseas for years. She needs to reconnect with people. I blinked. "At my wedding?" He sighed impatiently. "Emma, once we're married, we'll all be family." Family. There was that word again. Always used to justify asking me to disappear. Very slowly, I slipped my engagement ring off my finger. The tiny diamond clicked softly against the glass tabletop. Ethan looked down, then back at me. His expression changed. "What are you doing?" I answered quietly. "I'm finally putting myself back where I belong." He frowned. "I don't understand." "No, you don't. You think this ended because of one chair. It didn't. It ended because every time someone wanted my place, you handed it to them." For the first time since we'd met, Ethan had absolutely nothing to say. Ethan stared at the engagement ring lying on the kitchen island for several seconds. He didn't touch it, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Finally, he picked it up. "You don't mean this." I zipped my suitcase closed. "I've never meant anything more." His voice stayed calm, too calm. "We've spent 7 years building this." "I know. So you're throwing it away?" "Because of a seating chart?" I almost smiled, even now. He still believed the chair had ended us. Not the years. The chair. "It's never been about the chair," I said quietly. "It was every time you asked me to move. For Claire. For your mother. For your investors. For everyone. And except me." He rubbed his forehead. "You always understood." "No, I always surrendered. There's a difference." He stepped closer. "Fine. I'll fix everything. The sweetheart table comes back. So do your photos. I'll change the music. I'll move every guest if that's what you want." His words came faster and faster, like a businessman negotiating a contract before it collapsed. I listened, then asked one question. Why are you changing it now? He frowned. Because you're upset. No, I shook my head. Because now you're afraid I'll leave. Silence. His silence answered for him. I picked up my suitcase. I'm staying at my apartment tonight. You can't. The wedding is in 5 days. I know. We still have fittings, guest arrivals, rehearsal dinner. He sounded desperate now, not heartbroken. Desperate, because the schedule was falling apart. As I reached the front door, he grabbed my wrist, not violently, but firmly enough to stop me. Emma, please. I looked down. His fingers were leaving faint red marks against my skin. He noticed them too. For one brief moment, his grip loosened. The old Ethan surfaced. The man who once carried me into an emergency room. The man I'd fallen in love with. Then the dining room door opened. Claire stood there, eyes already shining with tears. Ethan? Margaret's not feeling well. Can you come? He looked between us, between the woman he planned to marry and the woman who always seemed to need rescuing. The decision took less than a second. He released my wrist. I'll be right there. I waited, just long enough to see whether he'd stop, whether he'd call my name, whether he'd choose differently. Just once, he didn't. He walked toward Claire, without looking back. At the front desk, the venue manager was waiting with a stack of suspension forms. She looked almost apologetic. Miss Carter, several deposits are non-refundable. I know. The losses are significant. 3 years of savings, years of late nights designing weddings for other couples. Money I'd happily invested because I believed this day would belong to both of us. I picked up the pen anyway, signed every page, one after another. Behind me, I heard Ethan's footsteps. Emma, he sounded exhausted. Do you really have to take this far? I turned. Claire stood quietly beside him, wrapped in his navy suit jacket, the same jacket I'd ironed that morning before leaving for the hotel. I looked at it for a moment, then back at him. You told your assistant. I was too easygoing to make a scene. His face changed. You heard that? I did. I handed the completed documents back to the venue manager. Consider this. And the first time I've disappointed you. That night, Olivia called. Her voice sounded unusually hesitant. Emma, there's something you need to see. What is it? I don't want to explain over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow morning? I agreed. The next morning, we met at a small coffee shop near Copley Square. Olivia never ordered. She simply slid a thick folder across the table. I backed these up before anyone could delete them. I opened it. Inside were dozens of emails. Planning notes, expense approvals, Slack conversations. Every one involving the same name, Claire Bennett. The first request seemed harmless. Move my seat closer to Ethan. The second, Margaret needs me at the head table. The third, remove the sweetheart table completely. Then they became bolder. Emma won't end a 7-year relationship over something this small. Ethan never refuses me. Please move Whitmore Capital investors near my table. It'll help me reconnect with Boston society. Every message was polite. Every message was calculated. Every small change had been one step in a plan. Olivia looked at me carefully. I thought that was everything. She reached into her bag. But then I found this. She placed a flash drive on the table. Claire accidentally uploaded an audio recording to the vendor group chat. I looked at the flash drive. For some reason, it frightened me more than the emails. Emails could be explained, misread, taken out of context. People always found excuses for words typed on a screen. Voices were different. Olivia slid her laptop across the table. I made 2 copies, in case someone tried to delete it. She plugged in the drive, pressed play. For a second, there was only background noise. Then Claire's voice. Soft, gentle, perfectly composed. The wedding is the one thing Emma cares about most. A brief laugh. So we don't fight her all at once. We move things little by little. The seating, the music, the photos. By the time she realizes what's happening, she'll be too embarrassed to cancel. Someone in the background asked, "What if she complains?" Claire laughed again. She won't. Emma would never throw away 7 years over something this small. I closed my eyes, not because I couldn't bear listening, because every sentence explained the last 7 years of my life. She hadn't guessed. She'd studied me. The recording continued. The Whitmores already invited investors. Foundation directors. No, half of Boston's business community. They'll never cancel the wedding. And once Emma walks away on her own, and who else is left beside Ethan? It'll happen naturally. The audio ended. Neither Olivia nor I spoke. The silence afterward felt heavier than the recording itself. Finally, Olivia whispered, "I'm sorry." We tried. The coordinators questioned the changes. We kept asking Ethan to confirm them. I looked up. What did he say? She opened another email. Only one sentence. "Please follow Claire Bennett's instructions. Emma won't mind. We'll all be family soon." I read it twice, then closed the laptop. The recording proved Claire had manipulated everyone. The email proved Ethan had opened every door for her. Neither of them was innocent. That afternoon, I met with my attorney. I handed him everything. The emails, the planning documents, the audio recording. He listened without interrupting. When it finished, he removed his glasses. "You don't need anyone's permission to end an engagement." "I know. But you do need to protect your name." He drafted 3 formal notices. The first revoked permission to use my photographs. The second prohibited anyone from using my designs or branding through ever after weddings. The third instructed all future communication to go through legal counsel. When he slid the papers toward me, I signed every one, without hesitation. That evening, Sophie came to my apartment carrying takeout and a laptop. She hugged me before saying a single word. "You finally came home," I smiled weakly. "Did you always know this would happen?" She shrugged. "I didn't know about Claire. But I knew one thing. You were giving up too much. For someone who never asked what you were losing." She opened the laptop. A presentation filled the screen. A luxury boutique hotel was hosting its annual bridal showcase. We were invited. She looked at me carefully. "I turned it down because I thought you'd be on your honeymoon." I stared at the blank mood board. White space, fresh ideas. Nothing decided yet. It didn't feel empty. It felt possible. "I'm coming back," I said quietly. For the first time in weeks, the words sounded like they belonged to me. 3 days before the wedding, Margaret arrived at my apartment. She sat perfectly straight on my sofa, hands folded, every movement controlled. "You canceled the vendors." "I suspended my contracts," I corrected. "The Whitmores still have the hotel." "The catering, the guest list." She leaned forward. "Do you understand what people will say?" I looked at her. "When I was moved behind a pillar, what did people say then?" She ignored the question. "You've thrown away 7 years." "Because Claire sat beside Ethan." I smiled sadly. "No." I walked away. Oh, because everyone expected me to keep standing behind her. For the first time, Margaret had no answer. The room remained silent until she finally spoke again. Her voice was quieter now. We'll restore everything. The sweetheart table. The slideshow. The seating. Claire won't participate anymore. She searched my face. Just have the wedding. You and Ethan can fix everything afterward. Afterward. Later. Eventually. Those words had stolen years from me. I stood. There isn't going to be an afterward. As Margaret reached for her handbag, my phone vibrated. It was Olivia. Only 4 words appeared on the screen. Claire rented another gown. A second message followed immediately. Ivory. Almost bridal. Ivory. Almost bridal. I stared at Olivia's message. Then, another photograph arrived. Claire stood inside the Harborview bridal suite. An ivory gown hung from the wardrobe behind her. She was smiling into the mirror, not like a guest, like someone rehearsing. The wedding was less than 24 hours away. My attorney immediately contacted the hotel. No one is authorized to access Miss Carter's bridal suite. No one may use her gown. No one may present this event as her wedding. The hotel manager apologized. He assured us everything would be documented. But one sentence stayed with me. Mr. Whitmore still believes you'll arrive tomorrow. Even after everything, Ethan still believed I would come back. Not because he understood me, because he thought I would never risk disappointing everyone else. The next afternoon, at exactly 2:30, I returned to the Harborview Hotel, not as a bride, as the owner of my own name. I wore a tailored white suit instead of a wedding gown. Sophie walked beside me. My attorney followed. Olivia carried a laptop beneath her arm. Guests were already gathering beneath the crystal chandeliers. Champagne glasses clinked. Someone smiled at me. The bride's running a little late. I smiled politely. There won't be a bride today. The smile disappeared. The enormous welcome screen still displayed our engagement photographs. Emma Carter and Ethan Whitmore. My attorney handed the hotel manager the signed revocation. Within seconds, the screen went black. Whispers spread through the lobby. People began looking around. Confused. Uneasy. Then the bridal suite door opened. Claire stepped into the corridor. She was wearing an ivory gown. Pearls decorated her hair. Margaret followed behind her, carefully smoothing the train. No explanation could erase what that image looked like. She hadn't prepared to attend my wedding. She'd prepared to replace me. Ethan saw me first. Relief flooded his face. I knew you'd come. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. I didn't come to marry you. The relief vanished. Margaret forced a tight smile. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Go upstairs. Change. We can still keep the schedule. I looked at Claire. It seems someone already dressed for my role. Claire immediately shook her head. You've misunderstood. I only wore ivory because... I interrupted gently. You requested my backup gown. You approved the seating. You removed my photographs. You replaced our song. Now you're wearing ivory. Exactly how many misunderstandings do you think fit into one wedding? My attorney nodded toward Olivia. She connected her laptop to the ballroom projector. The screen lit up. First, the altered seating chart, the bride hidden behind a pillar, Claire beside the groom. Then, the edited engagement photograph. Then, the missing bridal portrait. Then the emails requesting investor seating around Claire. Then, the expense reports charging her gown fittings to the Whitmore family. Every slide made the ballroom quieter. Claire folded her arms tightly. Those are planning notes. They don't prove anything. Olivia looked at me once. I nodded. She pressed play. The recording echoed through the ballroom. The wedding is the one thing Emma cares about most. We move things little by little. She'll leave on her own. Once her place is empty, who else is left beside Ethan? It'll happen naturally. The recording ended. No one spoke. Not even Claire. Ethan looked at her. His face had gone completely pale. You said that? She grabbed his arm. They edited it. They're setting me up, Olivia answered calmly. It's the original recording. Multiple vendors heard it before it was deleted. The file metadata has already been preserved. Claire slowly released Ethan's sleeve. Then I turned toward him. The recording explains Claire. It doesn't explain you. He looked at me helplessly. I didn't know she planned this. No, you didn't. But every step she took... Oh, you approved. You called me understanding. You called me mature. You called me easygoing. What you really meant, no, was that I'd always be the one expected to give something up. He couldn't deny it, because everyone in the room had already seen the proof. My attorney stepped forward. Miss Carter firmly ended this engagement 5 days ago. Permission to use her name, image, photographs, and creative work was revoked at that time. The Whitmore family may continue today's gathering as a private reception, but it is not, and has never again been, Emma Carter's wedding. The ballroom fell completely silent. Margaret looked around at the investors, the foundation directors, the longtime family friends. This could have been handled privately. I met her eyes when I was being quietly erased. Oh, privacy never seemed important. Now that the truth is public, embarrassment suddenly matters. She lowered her head. For the first time, she had nothing left to say. Ethan stepped toward me one final time. We can start over. I'll fix everything. No more Claire. No more compromises. I smiled sadly. I never wanted to win a competition for my own place. I wanted someone who protected it before I had to ask. His shoulders dropped. He finally understood. Understanding simply arrived too late. I walked out of the harbor view without looking back. The wedding never happened. The reception quietly dissolved. Guests left one table at a time, not because the bride disappeared, but because the illusion finally did. Months later. Ever After Weddings moved into a larger studio. Sophie framed my very first business card and placed it beside my desk. If you ever quit this company for another man, I will. I'm changing the locks. I laughed. You won't have to. Our biggest project that year was a bridal showcase held in the very same Harborview ballroom. For the final display, I personally placed one name card at the sweetheart table. The venue manager smiled. Everything looks perfect. I looked at the empty chair beside the bride's place, then back at the name card. The bride, I said quietly, should never have to fight for her own seat. For years, I believed the greatest day of my life would begin when someone called me Mrs. Whitmore. I was wrong. It began the moment I stopped begging for a place that should have been mine all along.